Tell me when 30 seconds
Good evening and welcome to Poets Cafe. I am William R. Kraft Jr., your host for this evening, and our special guest tonight is Fred Muratori. Mr. Muratori has two books on the market, despite repeated warnings and the possible. Good evening, Mr. Muratori, and welcome to Poets Cafe.
Nice to be here, Bill.
Just starting off, I'd like to ask a question or two about your two books. Certain, some poets would write books and they thematically, they're thematically linked. Do you do that in your books, or is it just?
I've started to do that lately. I have one series of poems I was working on that's like a book-length poem that has to do with sort of big themes, big stuff, civilization and history of ideas and so forth. It's not quite as grandiose as it sounds, but that's where I started kind of experimenting, trying to relate one poem to another and build to a sort of to try to build some kind of motion from one to the other. The problem with doing something like that is that those kinds of long series poems are really hard to publish because they're very hard to excerpt. But that's been in the works. I'm working on something else now that's somewhat similar.
My other question comes from your webpage, the Spectra, I believe it's called. Is that the title of the collection that you're working on, or is that just?
It's the title of a manuscript that I started in the late 80s, and I had, up until that point, I'd been writing some fairly traditionally formal poems, traditional forms like sonnets and villanelles and so forth. And I got tired of that and started looking for some new direction and began to write. I just stumbled across a form that these poems are 15 lines long and they consist of 13-syllable lines. And that actually evolved in a way from a kind of iambic pentameter line, which was kind of strange. And at the time I'd been reading a bunch of very weird things. I'd been reading these translations of the French poet Jacques Dupin. I was reading Edward Dahlberg, who was one of the crazier authors from the 1950s, and also the poetry of William Bronck and several others. And the poems began to take a very hurried pace, and I started to realize that they were about time. They were about the fear of not having enough time or enough ability to perceive everything that's around us at the moment it happens. And so I call them kind of high-velocity lyrics because they really tend to flow. They're in jammed lines, which means they flow one into another very quickly. And they were very exciting and fun to write. But that project, thankfully, is over. I started, even when I wasn't even intending to, I started to write 13-syllable lines, so I felt it was time to stop. But that book's looking for, the manuscript is looking for a publisher. It's on the World Wide Web right now, just as I put it up there as a way to teach myself how to use hypertext markup language.
You mentioned that you used to use form. Did you write in strict form? Did you always write in a certain form, or was it?
In fact, when I was in graduate school in the late 70s, mid-late 70s, it was very much against. It wasn't very cool to write in form. I mean, you just didn't do it. And at one point, I began to think that our teachers and professors were hiding something from us. I mean, what was the big deal? And I remember watching a friend's house over by Skaneateles Lake one summer and deciding that I wanted to try my hand at writing a sonnet, formal sonnet. And I started doing it. I realized how difficult it was, but I learned an awful lot from the process. I continued to do that for several years, just because I felt it was like an apprenticeship. It was something that I needed to learn how to do, even if I didn't become particularly expert at it.
The thing that I was going to suggest is, I found when I tried writing form, even if you don't intend on writing form, it helps you to learn the forms, because I think that even helps you more when you try to write free form.
It helps you recognize patterns or repetitions or things in your work that are doing that are very good techniques.
Okay. On your criticism. My major question about the criticism is, have you noticed certain movements like coming to be in poetry in the past year or so, or?
Well, in the past year.
Well, I don't mean the past year. I mean the past 10 years or so.
Well, obviously language poetry has grown in its reputation since that started actually in the late 70s, pretty much on the West Coast, and has spread. And that's something that a lot of people are turning toward more and more. In fact, if you get on the internet and you see some of the poetry resources there, it's amazing. There's a listserv or discussion group out of the University of Buffalo that's all pretty much language poets. And the pantheon of major poets there is very different from the more traditional or mainstream kinds of poets that you see reviewed in the New York Times or published in a poetry magazine. I don't know what it's like, but I came across something the other day on the World Wide Web that was a site for sci-fi coup, which I guess means science fiction haiku, and I have no idea what that's like. I didn't at the time feel like I wanted to look at it, but eventually I might.
Yeah, I've noticed if you go on the web and try to look at poetry, you can find almost anything that you possibly want. Through your criticism, do you think that helps you write your own poetry, or?
Well, I think I want to make a difference between literary theory and what I do, which is criticism. I review lots of poetry books, and I write essays about poetry. I don't really write critical theory like deconstruction and so forth. I'm not sure whether theory can have a good effect or a positive effect on a poet. It really all depends on the individual. For me, reviewing books of poetry is great because it really forces me to understand the dynamics of someone else's work. And again, it's a learning experience, and you could see something they're doing that might contribute to recognizing again something that you're doing. You don't want to necessarily be unduly influenced by somebody else, but at the same time you want to learn from them.
Moving right along, the one thing that I was curious about, I first I first knew you through a BOCES workshop that I took last fall. And is there a plan for this workshop to happen again?
I hope so. We wanted to do it this spring, and not enough people signed up in time. I'm hoping that there'll be another chance to do it in the fall because I really enjoy it. I've enjoyed teaching it a great deal. And I don't even know if I was teaching it. I was really just, I think, providing an opportunity for a group of people to get together and talk about their work. And I was just really impressed with the real high-quality talent that exists in this area. And I feel like I've encountered some poets whose work I'm going to be looking for in the future in the magazines because they're really.
That was my second question on that about the quality of their work, and you already answered that. I was just curious what you thought about the talent in the local area, but you pretty much already answered that.
Really, people who. I mean, given the fact that this is a university community, people seem to be extremely well read. People seem to have some sense of where they want to go in terms of their own work imaginatively, and that really is exciting to be around. One of the other things that I wanted to cover, I really haven't gotten into yet, were your two previous books, Despite Repeated Warnings and The Possible. And now, starting off, Despite Repeated Warnings, the title, from the title, you think, it's like a slightly humorous title. Is there a special reason why you picked that title? I think it's a slightly humorous book sometimes. The title comes from one of the poems in the collection, which was written in Ottava Rima, and it's actually a fairly serious poem. But I think there are elements of humor and irony and strange juxtapositions throughout the poems, and I tried not to write too heavy-handed. I think the worst thing a poet can do is be boring, I believe. And if you have to take risks not to be boring, then that's fine. Just go right ahead.
Another thing on workshops. Now we mentioned the BOCES workshop that you taught. Have you attended workshops that you thought helped?
Sure. Well, I have an MA in creative writing from Syracuse, where
Yeah.
I was in the early mid-'70s. I worked with Philip Booth and W.D. Snodgrass and
Yeah.
some other people, and that was worthwhile. At Cornell, some years ago, I took a workshop with John Stallworthy, the British
Yeah.
poet, which was mainly geared toward formal poetics, and that was immensely helpful.
Yeah.
Some years ago, I was at the Frost Place, and
Yeah.
which was a summer workshop at Robert Frost's old farmhouse in
Yeah.
Franconia, and really was inspired there by a number of people who were there.
Yeah.
So I think they are helpful. It has to be the right mix of
Yeah.
people and instructors and students to get the most out of it.
So do you find that working with other poets is inspirational, and if you did have to like say that certain poets were inspirational for you, who would you say was inspirational?
I mean, people I knew personally?
No, not
or
just personally, or
from
just in
reading?
general.
Yeah, in general. I've always admired Wallace Stevens a great deal. And recently I've begun to admire poets like Anne Lauterbach, who's not a language poet, but she's kind of adopted to some extent by the lineage. And I've discovered that George Oppen is a wonderful poet. I've discovered that I tend to like poets who give their readers credit for following the leaps with them, for being able to leap across those chasms of thought and ideas and images that are not purely logical. And I think if a poet trusts me to be a good reader, I'm going to do my best to be a good reader. And so I think I admire poets that are somewhat challenging, but at the same time provide a great many rewards, for the challenge.
The same question was about the people that you know. Do you think like a group of people, like say you and friends that you've worked with through the years, do you think if when you get together and exchange ideas, do you think that is helpful?
It's immensely helpful. I think one of the best things you can do is be in, it doesn't have to be a workshop, it could be just with someone you know, whose work you like, where you mutually admire each other's work, and just get together every few weeks and show each other work, and over coffee or beer or salad or whatever. And it's surprising, but you will end up writing for that monthly meeting or that meeting. You will end not writing for it specifically, but it gives you a certain motivation to want to get some work out and to want to look at someone else's work too. It really is a good thing, and it's bad. I think it's bad overall to be in isolation for a long period of time. You really need an interchange with another poet at some point.
Just a personal observation of mine, the one thing that I found sometimes that helps me write is I just detach myself from everything and just sit down and try to write. But sometimes I notice when I do that, the lines that I write seem forced. And then when I go back and I talk to people, then it comes a lot smoother. And that's one thing that I've really noticed. Okay, well, at this time, it's the end of the interview section of the program, and we'll be back in a couple minutes with a reading by Fred Muratori. So, stay tuned.
Streets, a virtual stage, it seemed to me. Makeup on their faces, actors took their places next to me.
I'm going to start with a poem called The Link, and this was actually
written out of a desire to become a paleontologist, which I never knew enough math to be able to do it. But I've always been interested in the connection between the present and the past. The link. There were days dark pterodactyls rose like capes above the tree line, wingspans vast, improbable. By a brook, I followed footprints big as flagstones, almost round, that disappeared in water and never emerged on the opposite bank. Heavy rain turned the woods to jungle, an aggressive menagerie of dragonflies, of black trunks writhing like huge saurians. I could blink into a world that had no place for small boys. I'd be the frail white thing that couldn't camouflage itself, there being no precedent for it. Just me, dwarfed in humid air by languid vines and leaves the size of suitcoats. I'd tell myself exactly who I was and not believe it. Forget parents, forget school, the missing tonsils, forget that time crawled all around me, paws still part fin. I could forget a time was coming when woods would just be woods, trees, trees, and the closest link between me and this excavation of a memory not mine would be the garden snake I'd jab with a spade, sweating hard, chopping till my heart slowed down. This next one is called Writing Home. And it's a somewhat older poem. I hope not the worse for that. This was written at a time when everybody was writing poems about the moon. And I thought I would contribute to that august body of work. This is called Writing Home. Yet another moon poem. But face it, if not for her, we'd hardly ever come home not ourselves, picking scarabs from thin hair, or hungry for stuffed peppers. Instead, we'd stay up thinking how we should have bought saran wrap when it was on sale, or how the Honda needs a tune-up, or what fools we were for rushing into marriage. What's worse, we'd act as if our living rooms were real, as if the destinies of genes were set efficiently inside us, immovable as heirloom dinnerware. But with the moon above us like a perfect test score, we sense the insufficiency of common goals, the public good. And though we ceaselessly invite the obvious, only quirky details crash our thoughts. We wonder why our lymph nodes are so diligent, and why, when everybody else writes home to say the evening is lovely and lonesome as the moon it gives away, we feel like running miles, skimming our pointed shadows across the whitened fields. My one attempt at a narrative poem came some years ago. I'm much more comfortable with lyrics. This is called The Casket Maker's Proposal. 10 years out of high school, long enough to know that summer's nothing special after all, I was hauling boxes out of state, a major sale for a little man like me. She asked to come along, needed a roll-down window, and that sense of stillness you get from moving fast. I said sure, because I never took her out enough. We drank beer till our tongues fell free as loose change jangling on the sidewalk. And then, deaf from road noise, caskets on the flatbed fit to rock right through the cab, I popped it. Just asked, like it was, what time is it? And blind with love's sudden puff, she kissed me going 70. All I could think about was owls when you find one out of happenstance, and you'd believe the whole white moon was taking off not 3 yards from your face. She was thinking, finally, he's not much, but at least his work is steady as it comes. We passed a 3-car pileup in the eastbound lane, big toys some giant kid tossed topsy-turvy. Like anybody else, we gawked. It was the first time I'd ever seen a dead man out of formal clothes, splayed over a guardrail, his head dangling in the weeds. I thought, death is real. But so is everything this woman sitting next to me will do or say to make it less so. I turned on the radio to find the song we'd need to remember. This is the title poem from the collection called Despite Repeated Warnings. And it's written in ottava rima, which happens to be the same form that Yeats used when he wrote Among School Children, a fairly well-known poem. Catalpa trees converse in summer wind. Imagine that they whisper, hurricane, as leaves display their sequined sides and spin wildly around, portending violent rain. Our oldest instincts help enforce their hint. The street is vacant as a lunar plain. Existence would rest lightly on the mind if every omen were as well defined. No slouch myself, I also run inside and watch a film about an alien spore that duplicates the human race, hiding in basements, slowly taking human form while people sleep, a kind of homicide that kills the soul, becoming you before you are yourself. Mother is not mother. Each loved one is an odd, familiar other. The breaking clouds pour out a hard white noise. Above them, geosynchronous with Earth, a necklace of steel satellites hangs poised in space. The images they send are worth 1,000 inner jolts. Small Muslim boys caressing automatic rifles, birth defects near toxic sites. A longer list would only overstate my gist. And what good would more overstatement do? We've seen our share of wailing women comb through rubble for their sons, more than a few recorded tests of the latest doomsday bomb. If I'm no longer me, and you're not you, what can these signals mean to us? Hearts numb from life lived secondhand, the dreams we keep as lovers, growing monstrous as we sleep. One more from this collection. Some years ago, I was listening to a classical concert on the radio, and it was a very, very quiet moment when I heard someone sneeze and disrupt probably the audience's concentration. And I thought if I were there, that probably would have been me. On ruining Beethoven's Fifth Piano Concerto. Someone coughs, a quickly punctured tire of a cough, smack dab at the moment when the second movement of the Emperor totters at its steepest brink of silence. Trances fall, and the audience, which had been bending toward that edge as if following a spell commanding it to peer and be drawn in, flops back. So small a thing to ruin so large a joy. Our bodies, released, vent their stream of petty needs, a cigarette, a handkerchief, a covert scratch behind the knee. How frantically the music tries to capture us again. It tells us we are powerful, in love, tall as redwoods, sensate to every form of passion, irreplaceable as Mars. While underneath our seats creak with the weight we tried to lose, and April raindrops hammer on the darkened, stained glass windows. Exhaust fans slowly rev as if to lift us up. This is from a manuscript called the Spectra, and these are the 15-line poems with the 13-syllable lines. And there are some leaps of association in them. This one actually is somewhat influenced by Frank O'Hara, and you may hear it. It's called The Obvious. Know the obvious or fear it. Why pretend the air is empty? Here in our acute democracy, each person occupies a piece, then leaves it for the next, undiminished, or good as new, or better, with scents of soap and lightly sautéed onions. Try striding through Fifth Avenue at Christmas time and notice air change hands, the street become a centipede of opposite intents, flowing pros and cons in search of an hypothesis. You might pass the very soul who knows what's innermost about you, what you force out of your mind at dawn, or else start working animal. Look, there goes salvation in a pair of skin-tight jeans. You missed it, but it was beautiful and meant for you, its body heat still hanging in the waiting space. We take the emptiness for fact, that flagrant vacuum, so plainly personless a guise. Here's another one that's called Investments. They have, uncannily or cannily, with good intent or bad, chosen to be fatal at the moment you could least afford. That moment when the flapping red amoeba in your chest lies cleft and useless on the cellar floor of what you know is always, damn it, true. That Hamlet, Lear, Othello, Emma Bovary must die for what they left uncovered of themselves, or drew from wells of longing hung like aqualungs the length of their rent lives. Over and again a warning flash ran wasted up your spine, the world's circumference tightened to a bathing cap around your skull, no more the sumptuous hotel lounge in which you loafed oblivious and dumb. Adulthood is a willing, simple ignorance no less than youth, a shadow state, anticipated healing gone awry to greater illness mind accepts and masks with ever briefer years, spring worn ragged from the start. Okay, this is one more. This is called Anthropology. There was something, but our parents never mentioned it. nor theirs thereto ad infinitum, because one vanished eon it was prevalent as pores and fingers, everywhere an outgrowth of itself, gone ingrown to the soul, uncrimped, dislodgement being its primal state aloft in lung or treetop. Something circled in the brain without its knowledge, since the body had no need of it, nor need to know it. Wouldn't tell the brain beyond its need for food or sex what undetected things it should detect. And system built, it couldn't. Body politics. Still, the species stands but stands apart, a landscape of the self incurred with power lines between, a network of transmissions, parity and stop bits, modulated flows. However, was life different? What inflection in the first horrific word aligned our minds illusionless? That's it. Thank you very much.
I'd like to thank Fred Muratori one last time for joining us this evening on the Poets Cafe, and I'd like to remind everyone to join in next Friday at 8 p.m. when our show is going to be a collection of poetry videos from a book of poems that I wrote entitled The Asylum. Well, thank you very much for joining us this evening, and I'll see you next time you visit the Poets Cafe.
I'm only happy when it rains. I'm only happy when it's complicated. And no, I know you can't